Hi everyone, Trish Connor-Cato here. Welcome to Microsoft Project 2021. This video is for users who are looking to gain skills in Microsoft Project to create, administer, monitor, and report on a project plan's progress. Project is a powerful scheduling tool used to track tasks, resources, and costs. It also provides powerful and interactive reporting tools used through each stage of a project, as you will see during the course. We'll start with a brief review of project management concepts. Although Microsoft Project is used by project managers, it's also widely used by anyone in a position that requires tracking a schedule. It is useful to know how project management concepts correlate to the way plan files are created and administered in the application. We'll move on to become comfortable in the project environment, learning how to navigate around so you'll be acclimated to that environment. We'll dive into creating a project plan file, defining a project, and assigning a project calendar. Then we will begin to create and organize tasks. We will manually enter tasks into project as well as import some from another application. We will organize our tasks by creating a work breakdown structure, defining task relationships, and scheduling tasks. All of this occurs in the first module. In the second module, we'll focus on managing project plan resources and finalizing a project plan. We'll start by adding resources to a project plan, creating a resource calendar, entering resource cost, and assigning resources to tasks. We'll also learn how to effectively manage resource conflicts. We'll end this module by optimizing our project plan, setting a baseline, and sharing the plan. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions you want answered by one of our instructors, please join our off-site community. The link is in the description as well. As always, if this course has exercise files, you'll find them in the video description below. Our first module consists of 3 lessons. Lesson 1 is Getting Started, where we'll go over project management concepts, and you'll learn how to navigate the project environment. Our second lesson is Defining a Project, where we'll create a project plan from scratch, define the project, and assign a project calendar. And then our final lesson in this module is creating and organizing our tasks. We'll be adding tasks to our project plan. We'll also import tasks from other programs. Specifically, there is an Excel file in the video description named Tasks for Import that we'll be using. So before we get started in this lesson, you might want to go ahead and grab that file and put it somewhere in your system for easy access. Then we'll move on to creating a work breakdown structure. It is a way of organizing your tasks. It's known commonly as WBS. We'll define task relationships and schedule tasks. The first phase of project management is conception and initiation. And that's the phase where the purpose of the project is determined, whether it can be done or not, and what would be needed for a successful completion. We're not going to be covering that phase of project management in this course. We'll start with the definition and planning phase, which really lines up with how you're going to be working in Microsoft Project. And this is where you determine the scope of the project and the budget. You set up your work breakdown structure, which organizes your tasks. And you look at risk management techniques that you may need to implement at any point in the project. Then you move on to the launch and execution phase. This is where you're tracking the status of your project. You're updating your tasks, your resource assignments and schedules, and you're reporting on status to your project stakeholders. The next phase is performance and control. And this is where you are checking to make sure that your objectives are on track. And if not, what tools can you use to get them back on track if possible? Whether the deliverables, the end results, are of quality. You're also going to be doing effort and cost tracking as well as performance of the overall project. And then you have the project close phase, which typically consists of some sort of post-mortem where you go over lessons learned, and the end of project reporting. I've launched project, and I'm sitting on the welcoming screen, and I'm going to just click on blank project under the new heading so that it takes us into the interface. And this is where I'm going to give you the grand tour. So I'm going to start at the very top of the screen where it says Project Run, Project Professional. Of course, every window has a title bar, and that's what you're seeing there. To the right, you have your login information and your traditional window management buttons. I always like to point out that when you have two X's, one on the top and one on the bottom, the top one controls the application, the bottom one controls the current file. To the left of your title bar, you have a little bit of a quick access toolbar, which can be customized like in all your other Microsoft programs. There is a useful thing that we'll be using throughout the course. So I'm going to show you one way to customize that quick access toolbar. And so we're going to go to the project tab on the ribbon. And in the properties group, you'll see several different icons, and the group names are at the bottom. So in the properties group, we're looking for the project information icon. And what you're going to do is you're going to right click on it and choose Add to Quick Access Toolbar. So now that project information dialog box can be easily accessed from the Quick Access Toolbar, and we'll be using it several times throughout the course. So that's a good place for it. The project ribbon starts with your task tab. Everything pretty much that you need to do about tasks can be done from this tab. You have a resource tab, and the same is true here. Anything having to do with your resource could potentially be handled from this ribbon tab. You have a report tab. So we mentioned in the introduction that you have these built-in interactive reports. This is where you can access them as well as visual reports. And you can create your own custom reports from this ribbon tab as well. Your project tab is an overall tab. We'll be using multiple things on this tab throughout the course. And it's where you can find spell check, by the way. You have a view tab where you have lots of different views in project. Sometimes when you're new to project, it can be overwhelming. But what you'll find are the views that are useful for you, and you'll learn how to customize them as necessary. You have a help tab on the ribbon, everything about help or giving feedback about the program, finding out what's new in this particular version of project versus previous versions. And because when we selected a new blank project, the default view is Gantt chart with timeline. So you get that contextual tab on your ribbon, which is the Gantt chart format tab. That tab is there because of the view we're in. To the right of that, you have another way of navigating the program or getting help, and that's your Tell Me What You Want to Do box. And underneath your ribbon, this default view is called Gantt chart with timeline, so you have a timeline. That's a good high-level reporting tool, or good for you if you're managing the project plan. It's a quick at a glance of where your project is, as you'll see when we populate it throughout the course. Underneath your timeline, you have a split screen. On the left side of the screen, you have what's known as the entry table. And on the right side of your screen, you have your Gantt chart, which when populated will be a visual representation of your task duration, as well as some other things about your tasks. So you'll see how these views change as we populate when we start working on our project. To the left of your table, you have a view indicator, and that's where it says currently Gantt chart. That's the view that we're currently in. So the view indicator says Gantt chart. Now you can use the view menu to change to different views, or you can right click on that view indicator and you'll see other views that you can switch to. All the way at the bottom of the screen in the gray band, you'll see, and in my case, it starts with the word ready down there. And that whole gray area is called your status bar, all the way at the bottom. So it tells you that it's ready. So if you wanted to start putting in things into your project plan file, you could. It lets you know that new tasks are manually scheduled down there, which you'll learn about shortly. And over to the right side, you have a series of view buttons, kind of shortcuts that you can use instead of using the view indicator or the view tab of the ribbon. You have 5 different views that you can switch to by using those buttons. So the first one is kind of shaded already. That's our default view, the view you're currently in, Gantt chart. You can get to task usage, team planner, resource sheet, and blank report views from there. And then finally to the right, you have a zoom slider. Now it doesn't function in here the way it does in Excel and in Word, where it increases the size of your font on the screen for easier viewing. And here, if you look above the Gantt chart portion of your screen, you have what's known as a time scale. When you're in this view and you use the zoom slider, it changes the time scale. It does nothing to zoom your text in so it's larger or smaller. The type of project plan that we're going to be working on during this course is the rollout of a training initiative. So it could be that your company is getting a new piece of proprietary software and everyone or most people need to be trained on it. Or it could be that your company wants everyone trained on Microsoft Project and they need to roll out this initiative so the training is conducted appropriately. So we could use this new blank template that we created before, but let's just go to the File tab of the ribbon and on the left side, click on New. And we'll just start with another new blank project. So now you see it has Project 2 up in the title bar. If we had closed Project and went back in and did New, we would get Project 1 again. We hadn't saved it or named it. So that's kind of how that works. It will just keep assigning sequential numbers until you give it a name. Now, a best practice here is to set up your project plan file before actual work starts on your project. Now, we know in the real world that's not always possible, but if you can aim toward that, that is a best practice. Now, when you first set up your project plan file, you need to define your project, and that means that you have to set the way that the project is going to be scheduled and either its start or finish date. And so we're going to do that from that project information dialog box, and we put it up on our quick access toolbar. If you didn't get it up there, it resides on the project tab of the ribbon in the properties group. Whichever way you want to access it, you can. Now notice in this project information for Project 2 dialog box, it has the finish date dimmed out. Can't access the finish date field. And that's because the project by default is scheduled from its start date. And let's just have a brief conversation about that for a moment. There's only 2 ways you can schedule your project, from its start date or finish date. Now you might think, okay, well, I have this project plan and let's say it has a deadline of October 31st. You might want to schedule it from the finish date and put in October 31st. But in the background, project does reverse logic in a lot of areas. So for example, it defaults to being scheduled from the project start date, and right underneath that, it says all tasks begin as soon as possible. If you schedule it from the finish date, then it changes that constraint to all tasks begin as late as possible, and that could actually end up jamming you up in your project schedule. So I typically recommend scheduling from your project start date. There are things that you'll learn throughout the course. Let's say using October 31st as a prospective end date again. Let's say you get to a certain point in your project that you scheduled from the start date and you realize that you may not make your end date. There are ways that you can, it's called crashing your schedule, so you can gain some time back in your plan that could potentially help you meet that end date, even if you're scheduling from the start date. So for our start date, what we're going to do here is I'm going to just choose the following Monday from whatever date I'm currently on as the start date of this project. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the next day as the start date of my project here. And we also, let me do this one step at a time. We put in the next day as our start date, and we're going to click OK. And a couple of things changed on your screen. First of all, if you look over on the right at the Gantt chart portion of your screen, you now have a vertical line that's going down where your current date is. And to the right of that, you have a dotted vertical line that indicates your project start date. Also, this task 0 that showed up, and that's a default setting. If you don't have it, I'll tell you shortly how to get that default task there. That also updated to the start date that you set. Now I'm going to show you how to control whether this default task shows up. And so one way we can control it, it's set as a default in my options, but we can go to that Gantt chart format tab, and over to the right in the show hide group, you'll see that project summary task is checked. What I'm going to do for right now is uncheck it. And we'll talk about the project summary task a little bit later in the course, but we don't need to have it there right now. After you've set a start date or finish date for your project, you're going to want to assign a project calendar. The project calendar lists all the exceptions, so days that no work will happen on the project. This is not like an Outlook calendar where you can import the holidays and stuff like that. You have to manually enter them. But the good news is if you set up a project calendar and you have other projects that are going to be using that same calendar or those same exceptions, you can actually share that calendar across different project plans, and you'll learn how to do that later in the course. For right now, we're going to go ahead and set up our project calendar, and we're going to go to the project tab of the ribbon, and in that properties group, we're going to click on change working time. And so project has 3 built-in calendars. If you look up at the top of the change working time dialog box, there's a 4 calendar box, and it's set to the standard project calendar. So your standard project calendar is for standard working times of 8 to 5. So 8 to noon, and then an hour off for lunch, and 1 to 5, as you'll see on the right side of that screen. So that is a built-in calendar. If I go to the drop-down arrow next to where it says Standard Project Calendar, you'll see that there's also a night shift calendar that's built in. And that goes from 11 at night. Well, it says it has, for June 20th, it has 1 hour. No, 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. the next day. So we can adjust the hours for that. But if you have a project where people are working on different shifts and there is a night shift, you can base it off of that calendar. And then you have your 24-hour calendar. And no, we don't work people 24 hours. However, you might have equipment that is running continuously on your project, and a 24-hour calendar could be assigned to it. So you have these 3 built-in calendars, but you really don't want to use any of them. You want to leave those alone and intact. We're going to go to the drop down and switch back to standard project calendar. And over to the right, we're going to choose Create New Calendar. And we're going to make it a copy. It's going to be based off of that copy of standard. So 8 to 5 with an hour break for lunch. And we're going to give it a name. And we'll just call it Training Rollout Initiative, and we'll click OK. So by default, when project schedules work, it never schedules on a weekend. Now you can override that if necessary, but it will never schedule on a Saturday or a Sunday. So what we need to do for our Training Rollout Initiative calendar is put exceptions on there for days that we know no work is going to happen, with the exception of the weekends. So if I look at this mini calendar, if I do the down arrow to scroll down, it will take me to the following month. And so we'll notice that Independence Day is on July 4th. I'm going to go ahead and click on the 4th of July on that mini calendar. And then on the lower half of the screen, you have 2 tabs, Exceptions and Work Weeks. We're on the Exceptions tab. And in the name box, we're going to just type Independence Day. And when you press your tab key, it will populate the start and the finish dates for July 4th because we selected it on the calendar. Now, if you click on the next name line underneath Independence Day and then back on Independence Day, you'll notice that the Details button on the right side will become available to you. Go ahead and click Details. And this is where you can set up Independence Day as recurring. So underneath Recurrence Pattern, we're going to select the option button in front of Yearly. And we're going to we'll leave it on July 4th. And then what I usually do, you can end after a certain amount of occurrences. I'm going to choose End By, and I'm going to change the year 22 to the year, I'm going to change it to the year 2050, so 50. And then click OK. So somewhere far out, so I don't have to worry about it. So that's our first exception. If you look at the little mini calendar again, you'll see that July 4th, right? It tells you it's a non-working day. It's based on the particular exception of Independence Day on the calendar. So now let's navigate our little mini calendar and let's go to September. And we're going to do September 5th. Make sure that date is selected. Put in Labor Day as an exception on the next name line and tab. Click away from the line and back on it so you can get to Details. And make that recurring yearly on the first Monday of September and end it in the year 2050, the recurrence. And those are the 2 exceptions we'll put on. And again, later you can OK your way out of there. Later on in the course, you'll learn how that calendar can be utilized by other project plans. So you don't always have to recreate the wheel. Once you've added the exceptions to your calendar, we just need to tell your project plan file to use that calendar. And we're going to go back to our project information icon on the Quick Access toolbar to do that. On the right side of the project information dialog box, you'll notice the calendar defaults to the standard calendar. We're going to do the drop down next to standard and choose training rollout initiative and click OK. So it won't assign any work on the project for the 4th of July or for Labor Day based on the exceptions that we put on our calendar. Before we start manually entering tasks into our project plan file, we should probably go ahead and save the work that we've done so far. So I'm going to go ahead and you can click the save icon or go to File, Save, or Save As. It's going to take you to Save As. I'm going to browse for where I want to place this. And I'm going to just navigate to where I want to place my project plan file. And I'm going to name it Training Rollout Initiative and save it. So now, of course, our title bar updated with the proper name for our file, and we're ready to start manually entering tasks. Now, there are two modes, if you will, when you enter tasks. There's manually scheduled, and earlier I pointed out that it says that new tasks are by default manually scheduled. And then there's the automatic schedule. If I click down there, I can auto schedule new tasks. We're going to leave it on manually scheduled right now. Manually scheduled gives us the ability to put placeholder text for a task duration, start, or finish date. So typically, you're starting your project plan file well before work starts on your project. You may not quite have all the information. So you want to give yourself the ability to put placeholder text. And then before work starts on the project, I always switch it to an automatic schedule. And then that way, project takes over the scheduling. Right now, we're going to enter our task names and durations. And so if we look at our column headings in our entry table, we have an informational column. We have a task mode column, and you'll see the indicator for a manually scheduled task there in a moment. We have task name, duration, start, finish, predecessors, resource names. We'll deal with start, finish, predecessors, and resource names later. For right now, we're going to click in the first task name cell. And you want your task names to be fairly short noun-verb combinations. So we're going to type define project objectives and describe mission statement and press enter. So, and you could have pressed tab. I'll go back up arrow. You could press tab to get over to duration. The default unit for a duration is days, so you don't have to type the D, which would normally represent days, if the duration is in days. In that duration cell, we're going to type the number 2 and press enter. And notice how it gives it days. Now, a couple of things happened. I want to direct your attention to the task mode column. And the push pin with the question mark is indicative of a manually scheduled task. There's only two modes, manual and auto. If you look over at your Gantt chart, you have a bar on your Gantt chart that is representing the duration of the task, which is 2 days. If you hover over that bar, it will give you a screen tip that says duration only. And the task start date is the date that we set our project to start on. Its finish date is the following day because we made the duration 2 days. Let's put our next task in. The next one is ensure total participation by training team and support staff. And I'm going to tab after that one and that's a 1-day duration. So I'm going to just type the number 1 and press enter. We're going to add several more tasks at this point. I'm going to go ahead and get them entered in, and then when I resume, you'll see them and you can copy them from my screen. I've completed our initial task list, and I've widened the task name column so it doesn't word wrap. So you're going to complete the other entries on this list on your own. So now I'm showing the task for import Excel file that's in the video description, and the file has 2 tabs. The first tab, the manually enter tab, those are the tasks that we've already entered into project. Now we have another tab at the bottom, the import tab, and we're actually going to use this tab to bring the rest of the project plan tasks into the file. Now, we don't need to import the task ID that's in column A. So I'm going to just click in cell B1, hold down my Shift and my Control keys. I'm going to tap my right arrow and my down arrow to select everything on this import sheet except column A. And then I'm going to do Control C just to copy it. And now I'm ready to switch back over to my project plan. And I'm going to click in the first blank task name cell. And by the way, notice the row numbers on the left, those correspond to the task numbers right now. So task 1 is define project objectives and describe mission statement. And now I'm going to press Control V to paste the rest of the information in. So didn't have to type all of that stuff. And some of the rows are kind of weird. I'm seeing some kind of row deviations here in terms of the size. So I'm going to just expand my task name column so we don't get any text wrap. And I'm just dragging it, putting my mouse between the divider between it and the duration column headings. And that just fixed my little row issue that I had. You may not have had that issue. It could be a resolution thing. So we have our task list completed in here now. And that's as of right now. Now, again, we may not know all the information. And since we're in manually scheduled mode, we can use placeholder text, as I mentioned, for duration, start, or finish date. So if you look at task 8 by row number, for that duration, which is currently 1.5 days, I'm going to just go into the duration field and I'm going to type ask coordinator and press enter. So it allows me to put placeholder text there. Notice that the corresponding bar on the Gantt chart portion disappeared because we no longer have a duration. Now, once we put it into auto schedule mode, once project takes over the schedule, you won't be able to type that kind of placeholder text in the duration or start and finish date fields. We're going to change that duration back to 1.5 days. So that's only, again, because you're in manually scheduled mode, will it allow that. Let's say that our task list is as complete as we think it could be at this point. And so we want project to take over our scheduling. We want to change it all to auto scheduled. And so what I'm going to do, and this is very similar to in Excel, I can click in the gray box between the row and column headings, the intersection box for your table on the left to select everything. And then on the task tab of the ribbon in the task group, you will see a manually scheduled icon, which is already shaded because everything is manually scheduled. And right next to it, you have auto schedule. Go ahead and click auto schedule. And then you can just click away from on any cell in your table to get rid of the selection. So a couple of things happened. First, take a look at your task mode column. It now has a different icon in there, and that icon represents an auto scheduled task. And it matches the icon that's on the task tab of the ribbon for auto schedule. The other thing that happened is the color of the bars in your Gantt chart changed. They're a deeper color now. Before it was a lighter color, and that's lighter for a manually scheduled task versus darker for auto scheduled tasks. And last but certainly not least, based on our project start date, it has populated the start and the finish dates for our entire project. Now you'll notice if you look at the start date column, all of the tasks are starting on the project start date. And that's where creating a work breakdown structure to start organizing our tasks and relating them to each other will make our start and finish dates adjust. And that's the section we're going to be going into now. One way to organize our tasks is to start creating summary tasks before applying a work breakdown structure series of codes to each task. So we had earlier seen task 0 on my screen, and I got rid of it before we really started doing anything when we had our blank template. And so now it's time to bring back task 0. So on the ribbon, I'm going to go to the Gantt chart format tab, and over in the show hide group to the right, you're going to check the box in front of project summary task. And when you do that, you get a new task at the very top. It takes on the name of your project. It is in bold. If you look at the row number, it's row 0. That's why it's known as task 0. And that is an example of a summary task. That is your whole project. Based on the information in here right now, the whole project will take 10 days based on the start and finish dates. So a summary task like this one is, its information comes from its subtasks, all the tasks underneath it. So task 0, the project summary task, is a good example of a summary task. If I wanted to collapse it, notice right in front of the task name, you have that collapse arrow. If I click that, everything in the project is collapsed. And then I have the expand arrow so I can expand it again. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and entered 2 other summary tasks for stage 1 underneath stage 1, and they're showing on my screen. So you want to get those entered, seek input from training vendor, and perform end user skill assessment using indent and outdent as necessary. And then when you're done getting those in, you can pause the video so you can just stare at my screen and get those done. When you're done, you can unpause, and I will have the stage 2 summary task set up on the screen for you to complete on your end. Now you're seeing the stage 2 project commencement summary task and its other summary tasks. So you can pause again and get those set up for stage 2. And when you unpause, I'll have stage 3 and 4 ready for you. And now here's how you're going to set up stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3 is a summary task. It only has 1 subtask. Stage 4 includes 2 summary tasks with subtasks. And now I've collapsed all my stages, and your row numbers should match up to mine. So I have task 0, 1, 22, 46, and 48 showing on my screen. And so when you were working on your summary and subtasks, to make it more automated, you could have gone down to your status bar where it said new tasks manually scheduled, and just change that down there to new tasks auto scheduled, so you wouldn't have to change it in the task mode column. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add some milestone tasks to our project plan. A milestone task is a task with 0 days duration. It's meant to just note a particular milestone in your project plan. So let's expand stage 2, stages 1 and 2, if they're not already expanded. And so my stage 2 is on row 22. I'm going to just right click on that row heading and insert task. And the new task, I'm going to name it Stage 1 Project Planning Complete. And I'm going to give it a 0 day duration. So milestone tasks show up on your Gantt chart as that little diamond icon, right? And with the date next to it. So that's how it shows up on your Gantt chart. 0 day task is a milestone task. Now for that task, we want to outdent it so it's at the same level as stage 1. So I'm going to just outdent as far as it can be outdented. And then I'm going to collapse stage 1. And you see it and its milestone task of 0 days. We're going to expand stage 3 and right click on its row header and insert task. And this one's going to be another milestone. It's going to be stage 2 dash project commencement complete with 0 days, and outdent it appropriately. And then we're going to have row 50 where stage 4 is, and insert a task and get your stage 3 project implementation and control complete milestone in. And I'm going to go ahead and do my outdenting on that one. And then for stage 4, I'm going to expand it. And right before the last task, which is the party, we're going to put in the milestone for stage 4 being completed. So just noting significant events in your project's lifeline. We have our milestone tasks, we have our subtasks, our summary tasks, and our project is pretty well defined at this point, with the exception of one of the most critical components, and that's task relationships. And we're going to be reviewing them now and then coming back and setting them up. To finish defining our project, we need to learn about task relationships and a little bit of terminology. So there are only 4 types of relationships in Microsoft Project. There's finish to start. Also, you'll see it represented as FS. And that means when one task finishes, another task starts. That is the default relationship type. So if you create a relationship between tasks and you don't do anything else, it will be a finish to start relationship. We have start to start. When one task starts, another task starts. And that's one that you might review once you start tracking what's going on in your project and you feel like you may not be able to make your end date, your projected end date. you can crash the schedule, is what it's called, by reviewing some of your tasks and figuring out ones that can start at the same time, and that can gain you more time back in your schedule. You also have finish to finish. When one task finishes, another task finishes, so you need them to finish at the same date. And finally, you have start to finish. This one is infrequently used. When one task starts, another task finishes. So you want a task to start and another task to finish at the same time. And then there's some definitions you need to know about. Your predecessor task is the task that precedes another task. The successor task is the task that follows another task. So let's just use, for example, task 1 precedes task 2. Task 1 is the predecessor task, and task 2 would be your successor task. In addition to your relationships, you need to know about lead time and lag time. So let's say you're using the finish to start relationship. When one task finishes, another task starts. Well, maybe when the first task is 50% finished, the next task can start. That would be known as lead time. It allows for task overlap outside of the relationship that's defined. And then you have lag time, which is a task delay. So let's say you have a task that's like, we won't have one in this project, but let's say you're painting a room, and that's a task. And let's say it takes 3 days. Well, you need another day for the paint to dry before the next task, which we'll say is like hanging the paintings, would start. You don't want to make it from a 3-day painting task to a 4-day painting task, because then you'll get resource costs for that extra day. So you build in lag time that says it's a 3-day task. After it's finished, wait 1 day before the next task will start. And now that I'm back in my project plan, we're ready to set up relationships. I've expanded all of my stages, so my full task list is visible to me. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select task 2, and I'm just clicking the row header, holding down my control key. Oh, I did that wrong. Okay, so row header 2, control key, row header 5 to select those 2 tasks. We want to set up a relationship, a finish to start relationship, that when task 2 is finished, task 5 will start. So we have them selected, and we're going to be working on the task tab of the ribbon. And we're going to be using an icon in the schedule group here. And if you hover over that icon, it looks like the infinity symbol. If you hover over that icon, it says link the selected task. Go ahead and click it. So a couple of things happened. First of all, look at your predecessors column. So for task 5, it's saying that its predecessor task, the task that has to happen before it can start, is task 2. And also, if you look at your Gantt chart, remember I said the default relationship type is finish to start. So when task 2 finishes, task 5 will start. And you can see that type of relationship on your Gantt chart. If you look at the line with the arrow coming out of the end of task 2 and the arrows pointing to the beginning of task 5. When task 2 finishes, task 5 will start. So you just successfully set up a relationship. Now we have more to set up. Now we're going to set up additional relationships. So this time, let's select task 3, and using the control key, task 6, and link those tasks together. Now select tasks 6, 7, and 8. I'm going to just click and drag row headers 6, 7, and 8, and then link those tasks together. Notice it gives task 7 the predecessor of 6 and task 8 the predecessor of 7. Link tasks 5 and 9 to each other, and then link tasks 5 and 10 to each other. So predecessor for 9 and 10 will be task 5. Now link 10 and 12 together. Make 12 the predecessor for 13. And then we're at task 14. In order for task 14 to begin, we need tasks 12 and 13 to be finished. So I'm going to start by selecting 12 and 14 and linking those. And then I can actually click in that predecessors box after 12, type a comma and a space, and type 13, and then press enter. So that one has 2 predecessors. Link tasks 13 and 15 to each other. And for task 17, we'll do this a different way. Just go to the predecessor cell for task 17 and do the drop down, and you'll see a list of all of your tasks. You're going to want to scroll up and check the box in front of task 8 and then just click away from there. Or you could have just typed in 8. So some say it's easier to do it that way than select it. It's certainly more efficient. So we have 8 as a predecessor for 17. I'm going to go to the predecessor box for task 18 and just type 17 and press enter. And for task 19, I'm going to press 18 and press enter. Task 20, we're going to do 19. And then we're at task 21. That's also going to be 19 as its predecessor. And at this point, I'm just typing them in. You'll know, just like any other Microsoft product, there's multiple ways of doing the same thing. So we have our predecessors in through task 21 at this point. The predecessor for 22, which is one of our milestone tasks, is task 21. So we'll go ahead and get that in. So we have our stage 1 relationships set up. Now we'll address our stage 2 relationships. So I'm going to collapse stage 1, and I have my stage 2 ready. We'll be starting and we'll be working in the predecessors column. We'll just type all of these in. We're going to start with task 25, and I'm in that predecessor column. And I'm going to just type 20 and press enter. So now you're on task 26. And that's going to be 25 for your predecessor. 27 and 28 are also going to be 25 as predecessor. And then 29's predecessor is going to be task 26. 30's predecessor is task 25. And then we're going to go down to 32, and its predecessor is also 25. 33's predecessor is 32. 34's predecessor is 33. And 35's predecessor is 34. And then we go to task 37. Its predecessor is 33. 38's is 37. 39 is also 37. And 40 is also 37. And then you can go down to 42. So we're skipping our summary tasks here, although it is possible to link them to each other as well. Both 42 and 43 have 26 as a predecessor. And then we're at 45. And 45 has a predecessor, 45 and 46 rather, both have a predecessor of 26. And then we get to our milestone task for the completion of stage 2. And for this one, we're actually going to use a summary task. So we're going to put in 36 as the predecessor for 47. Task 49, conduct training and track attendees, or it should be attendance. I have a typo there. I'll fix it. That one is going to be 47 as its predecessor. So 49 has 47 as a predecessor. So now I'm going to make sure in my task 49, I believe we brought that in from Excel. So I just double clicked it and I'm going to just fix the typo on attendance. And then I notice my stage 3 milestone task doesn't say complete at the end. So I'm going to just add that word there. And then we're into stage 4 with task 53. And actually, I forgot the stage 3 one, but that's okay. We'll just, for task 50, let's go ahead and make that predecessor 49. And then we'll go down to 53. And 53, we're going to give it a predecessor of 50. Task 54 has 53 as its predecessor. Task 55 has 2 predecessors, and that would be 53, 54. And task 56 has 3 predecessors, and that would be 53, 54, and 55. So I'm just typing those in separated by commas. Almost done here. So task 58 has 52 as its predecessor. Another summary task there. 59 has 58 as its predecessor. And 60 has 59 as its predecessor. And finally, the last task, task 62, we're going to be using task 50 as its predecessor. And go ahead and save your project plan. Now, because we set up our relationships, let's talk about the things that have changed in our project plan. Notice your start and finish dates have adjusted according to the relationship. Also, if you look at task 0, you'll see now the duration of our project is 63.5 days. And that's all the stages rolled up to that duration. So our tasks have been scheduled at this point because of the relationships. Now I'm going to expand all my stages again, and we're going to add the work breakdown structure codes. Work breakdown structure codes are universally known. Great way to talk about particular tasks in meetings and stuff like that. And often your tasks are referred to by their code numbers, their WBS codes, rather than the task name. So I'm going to show you 2 ways of where you can display your WBS codes. So the first way I'm going to show you is this. If you right-click on your task name column heading and choose Insert Column, start typing WBS, and you'll see it shows up on the list. And once it's highlighted on the list, you can just press Enter. So now we have another column in this table with the WBS codes in them. That's one way of getting your codes to display. Let's right-click on the WBS column heading. And in Project, hide column means delete column. I mean, you could get it back by inserting it again, but notice the symbol next to hide column has the little X, the red deletion X on it. So we're going to delete that column, and I'll show you another way of displaying your WBS codes without inserting another column. This is my preferred way. We're going to go to the ribbon, to the Gantt chart format tab on the ribbon, and all the way to the right in the Show Hide group where we got our project summary task checkbox earlier for task 0, you'll see another box in there called Outline Number. Go ahead and check it. And now if you look in your task name column, each task has its WBS code before the task name. So the first task, task 1, is our stage 1 project planning task, our summary task. Its subtasks are 1.1 and 1.2. And then the next summary task that we have in there is 1.3. Its subtasks are 1.3.1, 1.3.2, so on and so forth. So a nice way of being able to refer to your tasks are by using the WBS codes. Now later on, you'll see if we edit tasks, if we add more tasks, the WBS codes will automatically update. If we delete tasks, so on and so forth. Once they're there, and you can make any modifications necessary. So now we're going to build in some lead and or lag time for some of our tasks. Let's start with task 7. So I'm still using the row numbers. We don't have to refer to them by the WBS codes. I'm still using our row numbers. So we made task 6 its predecessor. And we want to have some lag time there. So these are all finish to start relationships. What we would like to happen is when task 6 is finished, wait 4 days before starting task 7. So we want to give it some lag time. What you're going to do is just double click on task 7. And when you double click a task, the task information dialog box opens. You have several tabs across the top: general, predecessors, resources, so on and so forth. You're going to go to the predecessor tab and notice all the way to the right, there's a column called lag. There is no lead column in Microsoft Project. When you want to do lag time, you represent it as negative. It could be days, it could be percentages. And that's how the system knows it's lag, if it starts off with a negative. If it's lead time, you're going to put it in the lag column. It could be represented as percentages or days as well. And you use that, a positive number for that. So we want 4 days of lag here before this task starts. So in that lag column, we're going to type -4, and I'm going to type the D for days and press enter. And now click OK. So notice now in the predecessors column, it says for task 7, 6 FS, which is finished to start, -4 days. So it's showing the lag there, right? So if you look at it on the Gantt chart, right, the line is coming out of the end of task 6, and it's lagging before it goes into -4 days, -4 days of lag time before it starts the next task, is what we're telling it to do there, right? So lag time is represented as a negative. Lead time is represented as a positive. Now go to task 20 and give it 2 days of lag time. And when you're done, its predecessor should say 19 FS minus 2 days. Let's double click on task 26 to get into its task information box. And for this one, we want to give it a half day of lead time. So in the lag box, I'm going to just type 0.5 and enter and click OK. So now you'll see its predecessor says 25 FS for finish to start, plus this one is going to start a half a day before task 25 is complete. It's overlap. So if you have problems finding the Gantt bar for a particular task, like right now on my screen, I'm not seeing the Gantt bar for task 26. I'm going to right click on the task name and I'm going to choose scroll to task, and it brings that bar into view. Give task 33 2 days of lag time. And your predecessor's column for that task should look like mine. Change the type of relationship to start for task 37 as well. And do the same for task 39. Make it in a start to start relationship. Add 2 days of lead time to task 40. You're also going to add 2 days of lead time to task 45, 3 days of lead time to task 46. And you can see the results of those on my screen. We're going to add 1 day of lead time to task 47 and 2 days to task 49. Let's go ahead and give task 53 2 days of lead time. And for task 58, we're going to do 90 days of lead time. And you can see the results on my screen. And then the next task, task 59, we're going to give it 1 day of lag. So that's going to be your -1 there. So now if I look at task 0, we're up to 146.5 days duration. We added that 90-day lead, so that means wait 90 days after that task before the next one or its successor task will start. And so our start and finish dates have updated. Our project is thoroughly scheduled and designed right now, except for some more tasks. So I noticed that I had accidentally deleted some of my stage 3 tasks. I rebuilt that part of the project plan and put in the correct duration and predecessors. So I just want to make sure your stage 3 is exactly like mine as highlighted on the screen. And then in stage 3, what we're going to do is we're going to change the duration of task 49 to 10 days. So we want that to be a 10-day task. Now your stage 3's duration should have updated when you change that to 10 days. But I want you to scroll to the very top and I want you to look at task 0, the project summary task. That has been off. That is only showing the duration. I'm going to collapse my stages now, just so we can see clearly what's going on here. So our project summary task is only showing the duration of stage 4, and it should be showing the duration of all of the stages cumulative. So one way that you can jog project into doing its job when it comes to this, if your project summary task 0, doesn't update, you can link your stages to each other to get it to update. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click and drag row headings 1 through 55, so basically selecting our stages. And on the task tab of the ribbon, you're going to go ahead and link those tasks together. And now you'll notice that your stage 4 actually adjusted. It really is 108 days, and that's where we put that 90-day lead time. So it is 108 days, but cumulatively, our project is 153 days if you add up the stage durations. So you need to kind of know about that little shortcut. Sometimes it won't update, sometimes it will. And this has happened in various versions of project. We've decided that when we get to stage 3, which I'm going to expand, we want to have conference calls for 1 hour every day during that stage. So we just want the whole team to get together, talk about how things are going. Are there any risk assessments? So we want to add those recurring calls to our project plan file. And the way to do that, so far when we've been inserting new tasks, we've been right-clicking on a row heading and choosing Insert Tasks. To get the recurrent schedule, you can't use that method for a recurring task. So I'm going to just select row header 49 just so that task is selected. And on the task tab of the ribbon, in the insert group, I'm going to do the drop down arrow underneath task. So when I do the drop down, I can see where I can create a recurring task. So I'm going to select recurring task there. And we're going to name the task status call. And notice it defaults to a 1-day duration. Be careful of that. Go to your duration box to the right and change the D to an H, which represents 1 hour. And we're going to do this call. So we're going to do the call daily. So we're going to do that option button. And we're going to say every 1 work day. And then we're going to start it. So we say stage 3. The actual work begins on stage 3 on, it looks like Wednesday, 8/10 with the training starting. So we're going to start the calls. We'll just change it to August 10th as our start date. So we just want to start them with that phase when that phase is up and running. And we'll say end after, so we have 12 days in that. We'll end it after 10 occurrences. So we want to have 10 of these status calls during stage 3. And go ahead and click OK. So now right underneath stage 3, you have your 10 incidents of the status calls, each one for 1 hour, right? Every weekday, starting on August 10th is what we set up. So you want to have them as close to the top of the summary task as possible, so they're not just blending in with your other stage 3 tasks. And we want to change the name of that status call summary task. Before we do that, look at your indicators column. So you have a recurring call, and it has the recurrence circular arrows in the indicator column. And then for each occurrence of the call, it has a little calendar icon. And if you hover over a calendar icon, it says this task has a start no earlier than constraint on Wednesday, August 10th. So for each one, it'll give the same constraint. The call is on every day starting on the 10th. So just more icons you'll see in your indicators column. We're going to double click on 3.1 status call, and we're going to change the name of it to daily conference call. Daily, we'll just say daily call, and then in parentheses to address issues, and close your parentheses, and then click OK. So it's going to rename every instance of that call that way, and that's fine by us. So we added those. Also notice that your work breakdown structure codes just adjust if you add or delete, like I mentioned earlier. And we can go ahead and collapse stage 3. And the last thing we're going to do in Module 1 is I'm going to show you a way to capture additional information about tasks. We'll only address 3 tasks in this section out of our extensive list of tasks. And we're going to start by adding a note to task 1. I'm going to just expand stage 1. I don't have to expand it to do this. And then I'm going to double click on it to get into the task information dialog box. And in there you have a notes tab at the top. Now I suggest that you date and initial notes, and if multiple people are going to be working in this plan file, that the newest note should be at the top of the note list. So I'm going to just go in and put in the date, and I'm going to put in my initials, and then I'm going to press enter. And the note is going to be assumptions, : you could take it off of my screen. And the first assumption is software will be rolled out to the participants' workstations during training. The next line is going to be HR and training management has given their approval and allocated the funds and budget for this project. And our last assumption for this task is all necessary compliance and regulatory issues have been addressed. And then you're going to click OK. And so if you look at your indicators column, you'll have that sticky note icon. And in order to see the note, you can just hover over that icon. And you'll see most of the note, but it cuts off. So you would have to double click to get to the notes tab to see the rest of it. So they're indicated by the sticky note in the indicators column. We're going to put on 2 more notes. Let's go to task 11. So that's another summary task. I'm going to just double click it. And I'm going to date the note and initial it. And then this one is going to just be can be skipped if instructors and training are done in-house. And then click OK. And we have one more note that we're going to add here, and that's going to be for stage 3, so task 48. And let me just show you another way of getting to the task information dialog box. This time I'm going to right click on stage 3 or line 48, and I'm going to click on information. And that's just another way other than double clicking. You could also get to it from the task tab of the ribbon in the properties group. There's an information box. So in here, I want to go to notes, and I'm going to date and initial it. And this one is also going to start with assumption and then a colon. The rollout will take place over 2 weeks, and then in parentheses 10 business days to train 75-80 users. And the next sentence, each session can have up to 8 users for optimal learning. And then I'm going to just put another sentence. This is the start of the hands-on training. And click OK. So, great way to capture additional information. I've seen project plans where the task name is not just the name of the task, but all these notes about the task. So you have to have some place to put this additional information. Notes would be it, task name would not be. To recap what we've covered in Module 1, we started by going over project management concepts, specifically the phases of project management. We started our work in Microsoft Project in the definition and planning stage of project management. And then you got a grand tour of the project environment and how to navigate within it. And then we created a project plan from a blank template. We defined the project by deciding to schedule it from its start date and setting the start date. And then we created a project calendar based off of the built-in standard calendar. We listed a couple of holidays as exceptions on the calendar, and then we assigned that calendar to our project plan. In Lesson 3, we started adding tasks to the project plan. We manually entered some tasks, and then we imported tasks from an Excel file that's in the video description. We started creating our work breakdown structure by organizing our task into different groupings. So we grouped our tasks by stages. We have 4 stages in our project plan, and we got our summary task and our subtasks. And then we learned about the task relationships, as well as some definitions like successor tasks and predecessor tasks. And you learned about lag and lead time. And then we created the relationships between tasks by linking them. We then went and changed some of the relationship types, and we added lag and or lead time to some of our tasks. And by doing that, we were able to schedule our task. We had already switched to automatic scheduling, so then the start dates and the finish dates are based on the nature of the relationships and any lag or lead time. After that, we got our work breakdown structure codes to show in the task name column so that the task can be referenced by their WBS code as opposed to their name. We've been referencing them by row number in this course. We moved on and set up a recurring task for a series of 10 daily calls that will take place when the training starts in our project plan. And you learned how to create that recurring task and set up its recurrent schedule. And then finally, we added some notes to some tasks to capture some additional information. Now that we have our project plan file as complete as it can be right now, in terms of our task lists, we're going to move into Module 2. Module 2 has 2 lessons, Lesson 4 and Lesson 5. In Lesson 4, we'll be managing project plan resources by adding resources to a project plan. We'll also be creating a resource calendar, entering cost for resources, assigning resources to tasks, and resolving resource conflicts. In Lesson 5, we'll be finalizing our project plan, and this is typically the last step before you start running your plan. So work starts on the project. You want to optimize your project plan. There's a couple of steps for that. You're going to set a baseline and learn what that is, and also learn how to share your project plan before work begins on the project. Before we begin adding resources to our plan file, it's important to understand the 3 different types of resources that are utilized in Microsoft Project. You have work resources, which is the default resource type, and that type of resource is associated with and tracked by time. It also allows for costs to be tracked. It can be people, and they can be listed as individual or consolidated groups. Or a work resource could also be equipment that is necessary to be used on the project. Then you have material resources. They're assigned by quantity rather than time. Gravel, paper, concrete, and paint are examples of material resources. When you enter a material resource, you have to enter its measurement. So for example, if you entered paper as a material resource, its measurement would be reams. And then you have a cost resource type. These are based on cost without time or quantity consideration. These can include travel costs, costs for building permits, or end of project celebration costs. And their total, the amount that they are, like let's say you had a lot of travel on your project. Each travel cost would be noted at that task level. So if someone has a task to teach a class and it's in a different city, they have to travel to get to that city, their travel costs would be noted on that task. So you'll learn how to deal with all three resource types in just a few moments. To add resources to your project plan file, you're going to want to use Resource Sheet View. So on the left side of your screen, to the left of your entry table where it says Gantt chart, remember that's your view indicator, we're going to right click there and we're going to choose Resource Sheet. So it looks like an Excel spreadsheet. A couple of things I will point out is when you're in this view, if you look up at your ribbon, the last tab is Resource Sheet Format because you're in Resource Sheet View. So just want to point out how tabs change depending on views changing. So we have an information column here. I'll go over the columns before we start entering our resources. Your resource name column, if it's a work resource, it could be the actual name of the person if you know it. If you don't know the person's name when you're putting your plan file together, you could give like a title like Trainer 1 or something like that. If you're going to have a group of people that can perform the same task, like if you're going to have 5 trainers, you can list them individually by their names or Trainer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Or you could do one line item. And I'm going to jump over from resource name to the max units column here. It just says max, but it's max units. If I had 5 trainers and I wanted one line item, I would make their max units 500%. So if there are 5 trainers available to work on my project 100% of their time, their max units would be 500%. So for work resources, you can enter them quite a few ways. And right now, we're going to use a combination of those ways. Your type column is a drop down for work material or cost. It will default to work. Your material column, as mentioned, if you're using a material resource, for example, paper, you have to put in its measurement, which would be reams. The initials will populate with the first letter of your resource name. Group is a column that you can use for whatever you want. If you need to track internal resources versus external resources, you can use the column for that, for example. And it's a column that can show on reports. Your maximum units is how much time in percentage your resource is available to your project. And then you have your cost column. So you have their standard rate. If you have rate information, you can put it in hourly, weekly, monthly, annually, daily. And you can specify an overtime rate if necessary. Project will never switch from the standard rate to the overtime rate. It's something you would have to tell project to do. Overtime is calculated differently in different states. And then you have costs per use. So let's say you're renting a training room, for example. how much does it cost each time you use that training room. You have an accrual column. Your costs are normally prorated across the task, right? Or you can have them accrue at the start or the end of the task. And then the base calendar is the same calendar as your project calendar. You also have another free field code, which is like group. You can use it for anything that you may need to use it for. In the first resource name cell, we're going to type Emily with the last name Barrington. And we're going to leave it on the default type of work resource. So we can skip, I'm using my tab key, the material column. Notice that the first letter of the resource name populates automatically in the initials column. For the group, I'm going to type internal. And she is our training director. I'm going to say that she's available to our project 50% of the time, of her time. Now, it just so happens that we have her rate information. So part of her salary will be charged to this project for the time that she spends on this project at her normal rate. So we're going to just put in her normal rate. Now, sometimes you won't have cost information for resources. Sometimes you will. If tracking cost is your responsibility, then you should, or at least get estimated costs if necessary. So we're going to type in 75,000/Y for year. And we're not going to give her an overtime rate or a cost per use. We're not going to change anything else. And I'm just double clicking between standard rate and overtime column so I can see her salary. And so her 50% availability means project won't schedule her more than 50% of her time on our project. All right, so now we have our next person, and this person is Teresa Brown. She's also a work resource, and she's also in the internal group. She's our training manager. When our project is up and running, she'll be available 100% of the time, so we can leave her at 100% max units. And her salary is 50,000/Y. We have our next one. Now, we're not certain. The training department has several training coordinators, and we're going to need 2 of them to help on our project. So what we're going to do is, we know that we'll be given their actual names before work starts. So we're going to just list them as training coordinator 1, make them internal, 100% of their time. And we know that the coordinator's rate is 35,000/Y for a year. And then we're going to put in a training coordinator 2 with the same group and standard rate. And we can always come in and fill in their real names when we get them. And anywhere, if we've already assigned them to tasks, the task will update with their real names. And then we have our training coordinators, our training director, training manager, our coordinators. Now we're going to put in our HR director, and his name is Randy Allison, another work resource who's also internal. He's available like 25% of his time for our project. And he's at 75,000 a year as well. Our HR manager's name is Alan, and the last name is Otto. Another work resource that's internal. And he's available 50% of his time. His salary is 50,000 per year. And we have just a few more. So we're going to have, let's see where I am here. We'll just do all of our work ones first. We know we're probably going to be using 2 trainers from a vendor. So we don't know their names yet. We'll put them in as vendor trainer 1. And their group is external. They'll be available 100% of their time once that part of the project starts. And the rate for the vendor is $1,500 a day. So I'm doing 1,500/D. And then we're going to do the same for vendor trainer 2. And now we're ready to do a material resource. So we're going to have posters that are displayed advertising these classes. And we're going to we'll put in the resource name as posters. And when you tab over the type, if you type the letter M, it will populate material. And we'll say it's measured in sheets. And notice the standard rate is just a flat rate there. So we're going to just put in 10 for $10. And then we have a cost resource, and we're going to name it entertainment and change the type to cost. And we don't need to note anything else here for a cost resource. Again, that's assigned at the task level. So we have our resource sheet completed. So another thing just to note here, and we'll deal with it in a later module, is sometimes you'll inherit a project plan file and it doesn't have any task lists or Gantt chart or anything. It only has a resource sheet in it. And that can be used across projects. It's called a resource pool. And we'll revisit that later on in this course. Go ahead and save your project plan. So we get our resource sheet filled out and we look at it and realize we forgot to put our marketing manager, Alice, on here. So we want her to be included with our internal work resources. We're going to right click on row heading 7 here in resource sheet view and go to insert resource just to get that blank line, just like when we were in the entry table in Gantt chart view. So in that blank line, we're going to get her name in there. And so her name is Alice Peak. She is a work resource. We're going to put her in the internal group. She'll be available 100% of her time. And she is a manager, so we're putting her salary at $50,000 per year, like our other managers. Now, the thing about Alice that we need to note, all of our other resources will be available to us for the duration of the project, except Alice. She already has some time off. And so we need to note that. And the way that we note it is by creating a resource calendar for Alice. So to do that, we're going to just double click on Alice and it opens up the resource information dialog box. Just like when you double click on a task, it opens up task information. And on the right side, we're going to click that change working time button. And so this is, if you look at the top, this is very similar to when we created our training rollout initiative calendar. If you look at the top, it says that is our base calendar, but now we're at the resource calendar for Alice. So if your resources have time off, it needs to be noted, but not on the project calendar. So by going into change working time for Alice, we're creating her resource calendar. And we're going to navigate to July 22nd on that mini calendar. And we're going to select July 22nd in the exception box, the first name box under the exceptions tab. We're going to type personal day and press our tab key. And we're going to click on July 25th on the mini calendar and put another personal day entry for that date there for Alice. And then we're going to click OK and OK. Now, July 25th and July 22nd are working days for everybody else on the project, but Alice won't be scheduled for any work on those days. And we can right-click on our resource sheet view indicator on the left and go back to Gantt chart view. And just save your project again. There are quite a few ways that you can assign resources to tasks. We're going to start by using the resource name column on our entry table in Gantt chart view. So it's the last column before you get to add column, right? Add new column. And so for task 2, we're going to do the drop down in the resource names column, and you'll see all your resources. Regardless of how you enter them in on the resource sheet, they will be alphabetical on this drop-down list. And we're going to check Emily Barrington and then just click away from it. So now if you right-click on task 2 and you go to scroll to task, if you look at the Gantt bar, it shows Emily Barrington, and it's also showing that she's only available 50% of her time. For task 3, we're going to assign Teresa Brown. And go ahead and assign Teresa Brown to tasks 5, 6, and 7. So a couple of things happened when you did that. You got 3 little red people in your indicators column, and that means that Teresa Brown is now over allocated. And we will take care of that a little bit later in this lesson. But the other thing I want to show you is how I did that task, how I assigned her to tasks 5, 6, and 7. I didn't do them individually in the resource name column. What I did was I just clicked and dragged row headers 5 through 7, right click within the row headers that are selected, and I went to information. So notice there's no task name there because I have multiple tasks selected. But then I went to the resources tab and I just did the drop down there. So that's how I got them in there, Teresa Connor Brown 3 times. Just a little bit more efficient way. It caused an over allocation, and again, we will address resolving over allocations later in this lesson. For right now, I'm going to fill in the rest of the resource name assignments for stage 1, and then you'll be able to pause and put them in on your screen. So now you have on my screen, I got rid of some of my columns in my table, so you're just seeing the task name and resource names. You can go ahead and finish filling out the resource assignments for stage 1. And pause the video while you're doing that so you can see my screen clearly. And then when you resume the video, I'll have stage 2 up on the screen. You'll pause and get those in, resume stage 3, so on and so forth. So you're going to be doing these assignments on your own. And I showed you how, like, you have a lot where training coordinator is assigned. You can select all 4 of those tasks at the same time and either right-click to get to information or click information up here on the task tab of the ribbon so you don't have to do them as individuals. So go ahead and get started on this. And here are your stage 2 resource assignments. Again, pause. Here's stage 3. And finally, here's stage 4. Now that we have all of our work resources assigned, we are going to go ahead and assign our material resource. And we're going to do this one a different way. So go ahead and select task 33 and go to the resource tab on your ribbon. And in the assignments group, you're going to click on assigned resources. So notice that we have Alice Peak assigned to that resource, right? Create posters and place them in high traffic areas. And it calculated her cost for that particular task. But we also want to, I'm going to scroll down here. And we're going to click on the posters resource and choose the assign button on the right. So we have the posters assigned there. And for the units, we have one sheet because we put in the material measurement as a sheet. And we're going to change that to 500 sheets. Trying to get into that field can be a little challenging. Try to type 500 in there. Yeah. So it calculates the cost for me. And so we have multiple resources assigned to that now. We have Alice as the work resource, and then we have the posters, and we put the number of units based on the material measurement and its cost. And so we can close that assign resources box. And we're going to do a similar thing. Let's go to the bottom of the project plan, our last task, task 77. Go ahead and select that one and go up to assign resources on the resource tab. And for this one, we're going to assign entertainment. So that's our cost resource, right? And we're going to go ahead and put in a cost of $10,000 and then do assign. So we have $10,000 budgeted for this huge party at the end of everything. And we're going to go ahead and do the X. And so if you notice, the resource name for task 77 says entertainment, and it has the 10,000 for that one. And if we go up to task 33, you'll see the resource name has Alice Peak, and then the posters 500 sheets. And if I'm going to move my divider bar backwards, and I'm going to right click on create posters and scroll to task. So it shows on the Gantt chart as well when you have a material or a cost resource. So at this point, before we resolve our resource conflicts, we're making believe here that we just got the information of which 2 training coordinators will be working on our project. So let's go to our resource sheet view and we'll update that information. So here's another view where you can see where you have over allocated resources. They're in red. They have the little red people in the indicator column. For training coordinator 1, we're just going to change the name, and that name is Eugenia Washington. And for training coordinator 2, it's Anita Redman. And we're going to save and then go back to our Gantt chart view. And you'll notice that anywhere that we assigned training coordinator 1, so if I look at the beginning, I have my stage 1 collapsed there, right? But they weren't in that stage. But anywhere where we had training coordinator 1, it now is Eugenia Washington. And so in addition to receiving the training coordinator names, we've also received the information on how they're going to divvy up their responsibilities on the project. So they're doing it by stage and summary tasks. So Eugenia is assigned to stage 1, identify departments. That's where their assignments start. And so she's going to tackle that. What we're going to do for tasks 12, 13, and 14, I'm going to select those as a group. Go up to the task tab and go to information in the properties. And I'm going to go to the resources tab and change the assignment to Anita Redman and then click OK. So it has Eugenia and Anita there. I'm going to go to the resource name column and just access the drop down. I made that column super wide, so let me fix that a little bit. And I want to get rid of Eugenia. So just uncheck her. Click away from it. And you get that little warning symbol when you click away. Click on that. And we're going to decrease the amount of work but keep the same duration. That's the option we want. And we'll talk about that setting later, but we want to go with the default. And go ahead and remove Eugenia from the next 2 tasks as well. And keep that same default. And so this is how they've determined they're going to work together. So we have Eugenia in identifying departments and so on and so forth. Anita will seek input from the training vendor. Eugenia will perform the end user skill assessment. And we'll switch, and I'm going to just do this from the drop down. In stage 2, task, starting with task 25, I'm going to switch Eugenia to Anita in that summary task list. And in that way, we don't get that confirmation. If I select Anita and then uncheck Eugenia, it just does it in that section. Okay, so the next section, well, we're gonna, there's another one in that section that we need to assign to, task 30 also needs to be assigned to Anita. Our next one, marketing strategy, the one email is going to be Eugenia, and we'll leave her in the training sessions registration. And then in schedule instructors and courseware evaluations, so task 42, 43, 45, and 46, switch those to Anita instead of Eugenia. And then I think we should be done with the training coordinators. I'll double check that in a moment. But after we do those, because it already updated in the daily calls that we have, so we don't have to, we had assigned both training coordinators to those calls. So we don't have to do anything with that section. In the next section underneath the calls, we do have Eugenia, that's fine. And then they're working together. And we're good for the rest of this. All right. And just some of our over allocations for Eugenia have disappeared. So in order to resolve resource conflicts, like over allocations, you can let project do it for you, or you can do it manually. I'm going to show you where you would have to do it manually, and you'll be able to make your choice as to what's the best way for you. So I'm going to right click on Gantt chart on our view indicator on the left, and I'm going to go to resource usage view. And in resource usage view, you have a time phased scale on the right side of your screen. And on the left side, you have any unassigned resources and then your resources that are assigned and the tasks that they're assigned to. Any over allocated resources will show there in red with the little red person in the indicator column. And it gives you the amount of work hours assigned to that resource. If you look at Teresa Brown in that list, and you're seeing the work that she's scheduled for on a daily basis, right? you can see her over allocations in red. So on this particular date, I guess this is in the week of June 19th, so 20th, 21st, 22nd, on the 23rd, so Thursday, she's scheduled for 2 8-hour tasks in the same day, and the same for Friday. You can see on the following Monday, she's scheduled for 20 hours worth of work. So if you were going to try to resolve this over allocation manually, this is what you would need. You would need a paper and a pencil. You would need to go look at the resources calendar before you do anything. And it would go something like this. Now, we're not going to do it this way, but I'll explain it to you. So I'm going to look at that first day where she has an over allocation, that Thursday. So she has 2 tasks that are 8 hours each. And what I'd have to do is take one of those tasks away from her on that day by making it 0 hours. And then I would have to scroll to the right until I find another day that she has an opening. And the first weekday that I see where she may have an opening here, as far as I can see, she's not over allocated, is on the Thursday after the 4th of July. That kind of thing. Or the Friday. So I would have to change one of her tasks on that first day to 0 hours. And then put that 8 hours for that task on another day that she has availability. Only if I've looked at the resources schedule, the resources calendar, because they might have time off. So you can see where this can be a tedious, not only tedious, but it lends itself to mistakes. So you can let Project do this for you. I'm going to switch back to Gantt chart view. And we're going to go to the resource tab of the ribbon. So the last group on the resource tab is the level group. And that's the way that you can let Project help you resolve your resource conflicts over allocations. When it's resolved, it's called leveling the project. So you have a couple of options here. You could level the entire project, or you could just level by specific resources. This is what I normally do. So I start by going to Resource Sheet View. It's just an easier way of seeing which resources are over allocated. So we have 4 that are over allocated. I'm going to go back to Gantt chart view. And in that level group on the resource tab, I'm going to choose level resource. Before we do that, we need to look at task 0. So right now, the duration of the project is 155 days. It starts on June 21st and it ends on January 25th in the next year. And you want to make note of that. Once you make note of that, you're going to click on Level Resource. And we'll start, since they're in alphabetical order here, it looks like by first name this time. We will start with, let's see, we have Teresa, Eugenia, Anita, and Alice. So we'll start with Alice, and then we're going to just click the Level Now button. And then we're going to go back to Level Resource, and we're going to choose Anita and Level Now. And you see things are adjusting. If you look at Project 0, the duration, the start, the finish dates are adjusting, right? And then we're going to go to Level Resource again. And we're going to level Eugenia. And then we'll go back one more time and select Teresa. So, and sometimes that causes other things. So I'm going to go back to Resource Sheet View. And it's still showing that they're all over allocated. So we have to do some other work on this. We're going to go back to Gantt chart view. And this is pretty typical. Sometimes when you just do level your resources like we did, it fixes everything. Other times it doesn't. So this time, we're going to make note of where we are now with the duration. So it's pushed out our project, and its finish date is pushed out as well as its duration is expanded. And so this time, I'm going to click the Level All button, and it gets rid of everything. It also pushed it out by another 4 days, okay? So originally it was scheduled to end on January 25th, but after we level everything, it pushed it out about 3 weeks. And we're going to just say that 3 weeks is tolerable for us. Now, there are some other ways that you can gain time back in your project. We talked about using the start to start relationship type. And I'm in my Gantt chart view, I forgot to add back in my predecessors column. Let me get that back in there. And so you can review, let's say that 3 weeks is intolerable. You need to gain like a week back. You could look at your relationships and figure out, can any of these tasks get started on the same date, right? And if so, you can change them to start relationship. That gains you more time in your schedule. So if we look at, let me give you a good example of this. If we look at task 6, and that's a 7-day task in duration. So task 7 is set to start. We put a lag time on that. So it's set to start 4 days after task 6 is completed, because we put that lag on there. And then we look at this. We have to perform the training needs analysis before we compile the results. So we can't really do anything about those two, right? But then I look for another opportunity, right, of where I can start, especially if I can use some of the training. We have 2 training coordinators. So maybe if I can start some of the other tasks on the same day, that would gain us back a week in our schedule. So those are decisions you'll have to make as you're going through your schedule. You're probably always going to end up with some over allocation of resources. If you let project level it for you, it could push out your finish date to an intolerable level. And then you'll have to use the other techniques like we talked about, start to start relationship type, or some more lead time between 2 tasks. So there's that overlap to gain time back in your schedule. So now we're moving into lesson 5. And this is where we're going to spend some time optimizing our plan. We're going to set a baseline, and before that, you'll learn what a baseline is. And then we'll also go over how to share a project plan. And these are the final steps before work begins on the project, hopefully. So we're going to start. When we're talking about optimizing a project plan, we've already discussed some of that, and that could be changing the relationship type from finish to start in order to gain some more time back in your schedule. It's also finalizing resource assignments, and it is resolving any over allocations that haven't been resolved through leveling. So if we scroll down in the project, we'll start seeing little red people again. And so we have, and a lot of it is Eugenia Washington, and she's our training coordinator 1. So because she's over allocated there, and this is for, let's see, so tasks 34, 37, 38, and 39. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change those over to Anita Redmond, who is training coordinator 2. So I'm going to change the resource for all of those tasks to Anita from Eugenia. And now I actually have some more over allocations for Anita. So let's change that back. Let's change 34 back to Eugenia. And we'll say that we're in a situation now. Oh, wow. When I changed it back, it got rid of all of my over allocations. That's very strange. But anyway, I changed it and then I changed it back and it's magically cleared all my over allocations. So if you need to, go ahead and change yours so they're not over allocated if necessary. And that's one thing that you'll do when you're optimizing your plan. That was very strange. I'm going to just save my project now. And yeah, it got rid of all the over allocations. That must be some kind of a glitch because it doesn't typically work that way. And then the other thing that we're going to do here is we want to assign the 2 vendor trainers to the actual training. So that's going to be down at task 60. We're going to change that assignment. So it's 10 days. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the drop down in the resource name column. We're going to uncheck Eugenia and check vendor trainer 1 and vendor trainer 2. And the setup is they'll probably be alternating the days of training. And when you get that warning, we're going to leave it on the default, keep the same duration. So we have that set up there. And that's really how you optimize your project. You just make sure that your task list is correct in terms of relationships. If there's any way of truncating the project by using start to start relationship type, you would want to do that, or by adding lead time to tasks if necessary. Making sure your final resource assignments are done and any over allocations are resolved. And once you do all of that, save your project. So this lesson is all about finalizing your project plan. And so the next step in finalizing your plan for certain is setting a baseline plan. Now, you may or may not need an interim plan, but you're definitely going to need to set a baseline plan before work starts on your project. And that is the only way you'll be able to track the progress of your project. So this slide is talking about the baseline plan, and you can set up to 11 baseline plans for each project plan file. Well, that begs the question, why would you need more than one? Well, maybe you want a baseline for your external customer and another one for your internal team that has other tasks on it that you don't necessarily need to share with the external customer. Maybe you're preparing for a risk event, so you have an alternate plan in case some things occur and it impacts the project. Or you know that there's a big change request that's going to be implemented on this project, and so you want a baseline of your original plan just for future reference. So those are some of the reasons why you would have multiple baseline plans. Now, your baseline tracks your durations, the start and finish dates of your tasks, the amount of work, and the cost. You also have the ability to set an interim plan, and that only saves the current start and finish dates. It can be used just as a project marker. It's much more simple than your baseline. So we're going to go in and we're going to learn how to set a baseline in our project plan. We're going to go to the project tab of the ribbon to set our baseline. And on the project tab, you'll find set baseline in the schedule group. And so if I go to the drop down arrow, I can set or clear the baseline. I'm going to choose set baseline. So it defaults to setting a baseline, and it's just called baseline. If you do the drop down arrow next to baseline, you'll see that you can have up to 11 in a project plan file, as we discussed. So we're going to leave it on baseline. If you wanted to set an interim plan, you could do that from the same dialog box. We're going to just focus on the baseline. You could set a baseline for the entire project or just for selected tasks. We're going to leave it on entire project, and we're going to click OK. Now, it doesn't look like anything happened, but I can show you how you can verify that it did set a baseline. There are two different ways. Let's go back to set baseline, and you'll see that now baseline tells you when it was last saved. So you know if a baseline has been set because it would be saved. And we can cancel out of there. Another way is we're going to go up to our quick access toolbar and go to our project information dialog box. And in the lower left-hand corner, you're going to click on statistics. So if your baseline values are populated here, that means that a baseline has been set. And so when I was managing projects actively, I would be in project statistics multiple times a day once work began on the project, just to keep apprised. I worked on some really huge projects, and so I needed to be apprised at that level. So it captures your start and finish dates. All of these are the same now. The duration of the project, the amount of work on the project, and the total cost of the project. And at the bottom left corner, you can see that it also captures the duration % complete and the work % complete. So once work starts on the project and you come into your plan and you start tracking your actuals, these values will fluctuate. You can go ahead and click Close on your project statistics dialog box and go ahead and save your project again. Now that we've optimized our plan and set a baseline, there may be at this point occasion to share your plan with some of your stakeholders. And so short of sharing your project plan file, which when I was managing projects, I was very reluctant to do, because people get in there, they play around. A lot of them don't know what they're doing, and I've had to recreate some plans that way. However, there are other ways. We're going to start with the least efficient way, the way that I'm going to suggest you never use. And let's go to the File tab of the ribbon and click on Print. So when you just go to print your plan, it puts a legend at the bottom of the page showing what all the different icons that are found on the Gantt chart mean. And it generated, if I look at the very bottom, it generated 28 pages. Now I'm going to show you why I say this is the least efficient way. I'm going to go in the lower right-hand corner to the multiple pages icon. And I can see that there are plenty of blank pages from blank areas of the Gantt chart. So in my opinion, this is not an efficient way to share your plan by printing it out and distributing the printout. I'm going to use the back arrow at the top of the green band to go backwards. So let's say you have stakeholders that want to see just the list of task names and their durations for the entire project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with task 0, and I'm going to select the task name cell and the duration cell. Then I'm going to hold down my Shift and Control keys on my keyboard and tap my down arrow so it selects the rest of the tasks and their durations. Now, on the Task tab, in the Clipboard group, you're going to click on the Copy button right on the word Copy and not its drop-down arrow. We'll address the drop-down arrow in a few minutes. So just click on Copy. Nothing visible happens. It just copied it to the clipboard. Now, I have a blank document open in Word, and I'm just going to switch to that, and I'm going to do Control V to paste. So I get 2 pages, and it's just the list of all the tasks and their durations. And I could distribute this as an email attachment or whichever way that the stakeholders want to receive it. And while I'm in Word, I'm going to do Control and the letter N to bring up a new blank document. And then I'm going to switch back over to my project plan. And I'm just going to click on any cell so that I don't have anything selected. Now, at this point, you want to make sure that you can see all of the resource names in your resource name column, and your Gantt chart, whatever part of it is visible, can be shown. I'm going to right click on task 0 and choose scroll to task. Well, that's not going to help me there. So the way it's configured right now this time without selecting anything, and even if you had something selected, it's going to override your selection. We're going to go to the drop down arrow next to the copy button on the task tab, and we're going to choose copy picture. So it's going to make a picture of our project plan that can be rendered for the screen directly to the printer or to a GIF image file. We're going to leave it on for screen. We're going to leave the copy setting to rows on the screen and the time scale as shown on the screen. We're going to leave those defaults, and we're going to click OK. I'm going to switch back over to my blank Word document, and I'm going to do Control V again to paste. And so it's only showing what was shown on the screen, the time scale on the screen. And so it gives me all of the tasks, the entry table that it can see. It cut off my resources here, and it shows the part of the Gantt chart that is showing. And I'm going to just close Word without saving any changes, and I'm back in my project plan. So my favorite built-in tool to use to do high-level reporting to stakeholders at this stage of the project is the timeline. So the timeline has been sitting underneath our ribbon the whole time. And what I'm going to have you do is click anywhere up in the timeline so that it's selected, and you see the timeline format tab on your ribbon. And so the first thing we're going to do, if I drag my divider bar backwards so I can see more of my Gantt chart, you'll notice in the timeline it has this green box. I'm hovering over it right now. And that's basically representing what's showing, what's visible on the Gantt chart at this point. And so the first thing I want to do is put my mouse at the green border at the top of that box so I get a 4-headed arrow. And I'm going to just drag it backwards to around the start date of the project. And you see the start date at the beginning of the timeline. So I'm going to just adjust that so it starts at the beginning of the project. And now I'm going to grab the rightmost green vertical line so my mouse looks like a 2-headed pointer, 2-headed arrow. I'm going to click and hold and drag it all the way across so that the finish date is showing. And mine went a little bit more, but so now it's showing more of the project in the Gantt chart. So that's what that green area covers. It's what's showing in the Gantt chart. Now we're going to add some tasks to this timeline. On that timeline format tab in the insert group, you're going to choose existing tasks. And it'll bring up a dialog box with all the tasks in your project. And for this example, we're just going to put our stage 1 task on the timeline. So I'm going to put a check mark in every task in stage 1, the summary task and their subtasks. I'm going to just check them all until I get to the bottom of stage 1 and its milestone completion task. So I'm just checking the boxes just to make sure we get all the tasks. And as a matter of fact, when you get everything checked, don't check the stage 1 project planning complete milestone task. I'll show you another way of getting that in the timeline. So after you check all the others, you're going to click OK. And the timeline is kind of overwhelmed with all of those tasks. So we have a lot of white space in the timeline. And because the timeline is going from the start date to the finish date, when I look at stage 1, it goes from June 21st to July 28th. So one thing that can help is changing the date range to get rid of some of that white space. So on that timeline format tab in the show hide group, I'm going to click on date range, and I'm going to choose set custom dates. And for the start date, I'm going to select June 21st. And the finish date is going to be July 28th. And then I'm going to click OK. So it has more space to breathe and space out the different tasks that are in that timeline for that stage. So another thing we can do to make it look better, the first task in that stage 1 project planning, that's its initial summary task, we're going to select that task and right-click on it and choose Display as Callout. So it takes it out of the timeline proper and it puts it outside of it as a callout. And it just makes the timeline less cluttered, right? Now, it's still going to be looking kind of cluttered here. We can go through and we can, let's see what this one is. Ensure total participation. So this one I can barely see. When I click on it and I hover over it, I can see the details of it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that one. I'm actually going to drag down my divider bar between the table and the timeline to get more working space. And what I'm going to do with that one is click and hold on it and drag it outside of the timeline so it displays as a call out so you can see it better. And these are the things we have to do. So there's another one, create list of target departments. I'm going to drag that above the timeline, make it a call out. So they're not all just bunched together and unreadable. So there's one here that starts with inform, and I'm going to drag that one down. Compile, I'm going to drag up. There's one that looks like it starts with define vendor deliverables. I'm going to drag that one down. And I'm just picking and choosing based on how they look on my timeline. There's one that starts with obtain, and I'm going to drag that up. Create a list of is going to come out to the bottom. As is send skill assessment forms. I'm going to drag that one out and just drop it a little bit lower than the other one so they don't interfere with each other. It's kind of how you do that. And then there's an initiate end user, and I'm going to drag that one up. And so the timeline is looking much better for me now. Now, there's another thing that you can do here. We're going to, so we look at the way the dates are formatted in the timeline. And if you wanted to change the date format, you could use that date format drop down. I'm going to leave mine the way it is. And what I want to do is I want to give this timeline a name. So the bar label button in the show hide group, and I'm going to just call this stage 1. And so that shows up here. I'm going to just drag my green band out of the way because it's showing that part of the project. Okay, so stage 1 is showing real close to that ensure total participation task. So I'm going to move that task down a little bit so I can see the name of the timeline more clearly. And so now that I have my timeline set up, again, it's a very high level reporting tool. I'm going to, on the timeline format tab, I'm going to click on copy timeline, and we'll do full size. And then I'm going to just bring up Word again. And on the Layout tab, I'm going to go to the second button, Orientation, and change it to Landscape. And let's see if I can find my 8.5 by 14. Not finding my bigger paper size here, but I normally change that. But in either case, I can do Control V to paste it in. And you'll see, I mean, it pasted in kind of like a picture, so I can make it smaller. It pasted in rather like a shape. So I can make it smaller, and I'll make the width of it like 8. See what happens. It might be too small. But it's kind of all fitting on the page now. So this is another way, and it's a visual way of giving stakeholders initial information about your project before work begins on it. So just as a recap for our second module, which included lessons 4 and 5, we started by adding resources to our project plan file, and we reviewed the columns in Resource Sheet View, and then we input some resources. We input work, material, and cost resources. We entered the cost for our resources as we were adding them to the project plan. And then we created a resource calendar to note some days off for one of our resources, so no work will be scheduled for them on those days. We moved on to assigning our resources to tasks. You learned a couple of different ways of doing that. And then you learned how to resolve resource conflicts, in particular over allocated resources. In the next lesson, we finalized our project plan by optimizing it. That's when we reviewed whether we needed to change any relationship types, or add some lead or lag time to tasks. We also added some other resources. We actually performed some more resource assignments that needed to be done and updated a couple of existing resources and watched how that filtered through to the tasks they were already assigned to. After that, we set a baseline so that we'll be able to compare our plan to what actually happens on the project when work starts on the project and we start tracking the actuals. And then we went over a few ways to share the project plan short of sharing the file. We talked about how printing is the most inefficient way. You learned the difference between copying and the copy picture commands. And then lastly, you learned how to populate the timeline and the ways that you can share it for high-level reporting for some of your stakeholders. Hi everyone, Trish Connor-Cato here. I just wanted to officially thank you for attending this Microsoft Project 2021 video course. And just to recap everything that we covered in this course, we started with a brief review of project management concepts before you learned how to navigate around in the project environment. And then we dove into creating a project plan from a blank template, defining the project by scheduling it from its start date, and creating and assigning a project calendar to the plan. Then we started manually entering some tasks, and then we actually pasted some in from within Excel. We began to organize our tasks by creating a work breakdown structure. We created summary and subtasks. We also defined the task relationships, and at that point, Microsoft Project took over the scheduling of our tasks. When we got to the second module, we focused on managing project resources and how to finalize a project plan. So we started adding resources in Resource Sheet View, including their cost. We created a resource calendar to note a resource's exceptions, and we assigned resources to our tasks. We also learned about leveling to resolve over-allocated resource conflicts. And then we got into optimizing our project plan, setting a baseline so that we could track our progress on it once work starts, and sharing the plan. Once again, my sincere thanks.